In the last chapter, we saw that the cliff-bottom catacombs appear to be a hub for various clues relating to the Night of the Black Knives and are primarily associated with the woman in the black hood. The woman in the black hood is either Marika or someone very close to her. In addition, a father figure often appears as a reference in this context, which leads us to believe that even Godfrey might have been involved in the Night of the Black Knives. There are no more questions about Godfrey and the woman in the black hood than about Godwyn. Who is the woman in the black hood? Is Marika the woman in the black hood? Did Godfrey not leave the lands between after all and join the woman in the black hood? Did the woman in the black hood and Godfrey actually work together from the shadows and ultimately turn against Radagon? Before I delve further into these questions, I would like to explain an assumption on which a large part of my theory is based. Since the release of Elden Ring, so-called parallels have often been discussed. Parallels are a stylistic device used primarily in literature. I believe that this stylistic device is probably the most important one we find in Elden Ring. Here is a brief explanation of what parallels are. Parallels in literature are a literary device that creates a connection or comparison between two or more elements, such as characters, events, or ideas, to highlight their similarities or differences. Writers use parallels to help readers see connections, contrasts, or patterns that deepen the meaning of the story and clarify its themes. Parallels can appear in different forms. Character parallels. Two characters might have similar backgrounds, face similar challenges, or make contrasting choices, allowing the reader to compare their development and understand the story's message more deeply. Event parallels. Similar events may happen to different characters or at different times in the story, emphasizing recurring themes or showing how situations can lead to different outcomes. Thematic parallels. Ideas or motives are repeated or mirrored across the narrative to reinforce central themes. Parallels not only highlight certain themes through repeated occurrence, but also make it easier to recognize underlying relationships. Parallels are not always about the exact details, but rather about the general connection and relationships between characters, for example. It makes perfect sense that Miyazaki draws on literary stylistic devices to make the lore seem cryptic. These require interpretation and cannot be grasped through simple data mining. My theory is based on the following consideration and assumption. The story of Elden Ring essentially revolves around the main characters Marika, Godfrey, and Radagon. Godwyn also appears to play one of the most important roles as the protagonist. Although these characters had the greatest influence on the story of Elden Ring, very little is known about them and hardly anything is told directly about them. If Miyazaki does give us the opportunity to reproduce the true events of Elden Ring, then the clues to this will apparently be conveyed indirectly. I believe that the solution to the background story of Elden Ring lies in parallels within the game. I believe that virtually all of the minor characters we encounter in Elden Ring represent parallels to the main characters. This means that the untold stories of the main characters can be found in fragments in the form of parallels in the minor characters. And not just in the minor characters, even the spirit ashes contain hidden parallels. The challenge in solving the background story therefore lies primarily in finding out which main characters are hidden behind the minor characters in the form of parallels. First, I would like to take a closer look at the story of Big Boggart and work out what information is hidden here in literary form. Similar to the parallel between Marika and the Haunts in Grandom, who cooks the gourmet scorpion stew, Big Boggart is also cooking. Here lies another reference to the circumstances surrounding Godwyn. When we purchase the item boiled prawn for the first time, Big Boggart gives us the gesture spread out. Why do we receive this gesture when purchasing boiled prawn? There is an illusion hidden behind both of these items. The spread out gesture can also be interpreted as playing dead or a corpse. In addition, the tail of a prawn resembles a tail fin. If we think back to Godwyn's story, this is clearly a hidden reference to the circumstances surrounding Godwyn's feigned death. There are also references hidden in the item description. It says, boiled prawn meat, a prime specimen of plump and moist meat. True connoisseurs know how to keep from oversalting. Boosts physical damage negation for a certain duration. The meat actually looks to have come from a crayfish. Not that it matters, it's delicious all the same. The line, true connoisseurs know how to keep from oversalting, refers to the fact that on the night of the Black Knives, those involved knew how to use the power of the Rune of Death without killing Godwyn. The line, the meat actually looks to have come from a crayfish, describes that the prawn, which looks like a tailfin, is actually crayfish. The confusion between a crayfish and a prawn is an allusion to the fact that Godwyn's corpse is also misinterpreted. Godwyn is believed to be dead, but in reality he has survived. The spread out gesture after purchasing boiled prawn for the first time and its item description together form a reference to the actual circumstances in which Godwyn faked his death. He is believed to be dead, but in reality he has survived. Continuing Big Boggart's quest, we next encounter him in front of Lionel. This is the same place where we encounter the Deathbed crabs, which ultimately represent traces of Godwyn's escape from Lionel. Big Boggart is cooking again, but this time it's boiled crab. The description reads, boiled crab meat, a prime specimen of plump and moist meat. True connoisseurs know how to keep from oversalting. Greatly boosts physical damage negation for a certain duration. Unlike the prawn sold, this truly is crab. Not that it matters, it's delicious all the same. Here too, the line, true connoisseurs know how to keep from oversalting, is used, alluding to the fact that those involved in the Night of the Black Knives knew how to use the Rune of Death without killing Godwyn. In addition, the boiled crab says, unlike the prawn sold, this truly is crab. Not that it matters, it's delicious all the same. The boiled prawns are actually crayfish, but are easily confused due to their appearance. The boiled crab, on the other hand, is actually crab. While Godwyn's corpse, with its tailfin in deep-root depth, is believed to represent Godwyn's death, it is not. Godwyn survived. The Deathbed crabs with cysts and pustules of Godwyn, the Prince of Death, are actually traces of Godwyn. The boiled crab alludes precisely to these circumstances. The final line, not that it matters, it's delicious all the same, is merely an ironic comment intended to emphasize that there is actually a meaning behind the boiled prawns and boiled crab. Here too, I suspect that it is no coincidence that Big Boggart was placed right next to the Deathbed crabs. The placement is intended to emphasize the connection to the Deathbed crabs and Godwyn. At the end of his quest, Big Boggart fears being cursed by the Dung Eater and asks us to let him die so that he will not be cursed.
It serves me right. Fitting bloody end. For a jumped up little shit with big ideas. Help me out. Would you, mate? I don't want to get cursed. Just let me die. I don't want to live like this. Not anymore. So, please.
The circumstances seem to correspond to those of the Night of the Black Knives. Godwyn had hatched a grand plan with the others and was supposed to die in order to escape the influence of the Greater Will. The Dung Eater seems to represent a threat to Big Boggart and thus to Godwyn according to the parallel. If we look at Dung Eater, he wears red armor with an image of a sun on it. The red armor led me to suspect that Dung Eater is apparently a parallel to Radagon. The sun, on the other hand, is a reference to the Greater Will. His armor reads, Omen Armor, malformed armor resembling an omen with its horns cut off, worn by the Dung Eater. The heavy sun-shaped medallion represents both the guidance he once saw and the ring to which it will one day lead. While the red armor indicates that the Dung Eater is a Radagon parallel, the sun apparently symbolizes the influence of the Greater Will and the Elden Ring. The Night of the Black Knives happened during Radagon's reign as Elden Lord. Based on this parallel, Radagon is a threat to Godwyn. Not only was Godwyn's goal to free himself from the influence of the Greater Will, but also to escape Radagon's threat unnoticed so that he could face him in the end. If I produce a video series about Radagon and the Greater Will in the distant future, I will return to the Radagon parallel drawn by Dung Eater and discuss further details that show how this parallel fits into the bigger picture. Behind the name Blackguard Boggart, or simply Big Boggart as he calls himself, there is another reference that fits the parallel to Godwyn. Boggarts are often described as mischievous or tricky spirits in English folklore. They are known for playing pranks, causing trouble and creating chaos, such as hiding household items, disturbing people at night, or scaring livestock. In some stories, they even try to outsmart humans, as in the tale where a boggart makes a deal with a farmer about dividing crops, showing a certain cleverness or cunning. With the help of many others, Godwyn tricked and deceived Radagon and managed to escape unnoticed, only to continue his resistance in an unknown form. The name Big Boggart would therefore be extremely fitting for Godwyn's story. Even the line for which he is best known could be a reference to Marika as the Hooded Woman.
Marika's tits? You must be hungry.
If you look closely at the statue of the Hooded Woman, you will notice that she actually has large breasts. Based on the last chapter, it appears that the Hooded Woman depicted in the catacombs with statues is behind the events of the Night of the Black Knives. However, it is not entirely clear whether this is Marika or someone very close to her. Part of the plan was to resurrect Godwyn in the Chapel of Anticipation. Do certain details seem familiar? A hooded woman who organizes an assassination and wants to resurrect Godwyn, thus opposing the Golden Order. It is Fear who bears an incredible resemblance to these events. If we look at the room in the Round Table Hold, where Fear is located, we notice that paintings of Marika have been placed here. The paintings emphasize that Fear is a parallel to Marika. This further convinced me that the hooded woman is, in fact, Marika. If we look at the plot in Fear's questline, we can clearly see that the events parallel the actions of the hooded woman, and therefore Marika. Fear organizes an assassination attempt on Dee. Dee's armor depicts a golden and a silver person. In this parallel, the Dee in the Round Table Hold represents Godwyn the Golden, who is murdered on the Night of the Black Knives. A very specific dagger is used for this, which is apparently tainted with the power of the Rune of Death. This dagger kills Dee as Godwyn the Golden. Later in Dee's questline, we meet the second Dee near Nokron. This second Dee appears to be asleep. As soon as we give him the twin armor, he awakens. This second Dee can be interpreted as Godwyn the Tarnished, who is associated with silver instead of gold. The second Dee, as Godwyn the Tarnished, is out for revenge and ultimately kills Fear as Marika. This corresponds to the plot of the protagonist, Godwyn the Tarnished, who is supposed to kill Radagon and therefore also Marika at the end of the story. It is also Fear who gives us the knife print clue, the clue that leads us to the Black Knife catacombs. In the accompanying dialogue, she says the following.
My dear, have you ever heard of black knife prints? Dear Roger likes to talk of them when abed, and the ancient plot in which the first of the demigods was slain. The black knives wielded by the assassins who committed the act, along with the impressions they made. somehow hide the truth of the conspiracy. These grand affairs are hardly my forte.
Here, too, there is irony in the last line. The line, "These grand affairs are hardly my forte," emphasizes the parallel with Marika, and that it was Marika as the hooded woman who was behind the Night of the Black Knives. The hugs with fear symbolize the love Marika feels for us, her son Godwyn. After such hugs, we receive Baldachin's blessing. It says, Baldachin's blessing, favor bestowed by a deathbed companion, protection of a hidden temple in the guise of a bedchamber. Uses FP to temporarily boost poise. The favor allows one to forget any aches and pains. In death there is only peace, for in death there can be no sensation. A baldachin refers to a canopy over a bed, often richly decorated, and refers primarily to the curtains that can be seen in the icon. This design appears only once more in the entire game. The design can be found at the top of the 4 belfries. In addition, the bell tower leading to the Chapel of Anticipation stands out due to a small detail. The skull on this bell tower faces in a different direction than the skulls on the other bell towers. I think this is meant to emphasize that the bell tower forming the entrance to the Chapel of Anticipation is the main focus here. In Baldachin's blessing it says, protection of a hidden temple in the guise of a bedchamber. This is not only a reference to the belfry as the entrance to the Chapel of Anticipation, it is also a reference to the circumstances in which Godwyn fell into the deep slumber in the Chapel of Anticipation. Furthermore, Baldachin's blessing states, the favor allows one to forget any aches and pains. In death there is only peace, for in death there can be no sensation. This seems to be a reference to Godwyn's memory loss, who forgot all the pain and obstacles he had to endure during his resurrection. According to our theory, the resurrection failed and instead Godwyn fell into a deep slumber. At the end of Fia's questline, when she finally tries to give Godwyn new life, we receive a special Baldachin's blessing. The radiant Baldachin's blessing contains a reference to the fork rift in our actual resurrection. The meaning of the radiant Baldachin's blessing and how Marika ultimately managed to resurrect Godwyn in the Chapel of Anticipation is something I will discuss in a later chapter. In previous chapters, references have already hinted that Godfrey was also involved in the Night of the Black Knives. It is unclear what happened to him after his banishment. In the rusted anchor it says, a rusty anchor wielded as a weapon. Each of its 4 flukes is thick and sharp, enabling piercing attacks. While the tarnished left the lands between with their lord, one boat alone was said to have been left behind. It is said that Godfrey left the lands between together with the other tarnished, but one boat was left behind. Why? Godfrey's blue cloak is reminiscent of the following garment: navy hood. A hooded cloak of deep navy, worn by expatriated royalty. Such cloaks were gifted to those who departed on missions to faraway lands from which they would never return. But what choice did they have, having seen the guidance of grace? What choice did Godfrey have after his banishment? Should he have simply accepted it and left the lands between? In the previous chapters, there were repeated references to a father figure who was apparently part of Marika's plan. Let's take another look at the 2 rooms which have walls with scrolls. These are the only rooms with such scrolls in the entire game. The first room is located in the Windham Catacombs and contains 2 statues of Marika as the hooded woman with a book in her hand. The scrolls and the statue of the hooded woman with a book in her hand symbolize Marika's plan. There is also a corpse with a lightning scorpion charm. The corpse hiding behind the coffin and the lightning scorpion charm itself symbolize Godwyn's role in the Night of the Black Knives. Now we have a second room which has also walls with scrolls. This room is located in the Fork Rift Catacombs and, due to its special walls, is also considered a reference to Marika's plan. In this room we find the spirit ashes of Black Knight Commander Andreas, who represents a father figure. It reads, Black Knight Commander Andreas. The Black Knights were the primary force of Mesmer's army. Their first leader was Andreas, a man endowed with great strength and command over the powers of the Crucible, and whose spirit in these ashes dwells. Though he remained a devout follower of Mesmer, after his flight from the Earth Tree, he would rebel after learning of his liege's serpentine nature. His righteous stand was rewarded with imprisonment in an underground tomb. Not only is he a father figure, but the description is clearly a parallel to Godfrey. The sentence, their first leader was Andreas, a man endowed with great strength and command over the powers of the Crucible, corresponds quite well to a description that could also apply to Godfrey. Not only was Godfrey known for his incredible strength, but also for his connection to the Crucible. The Crucible Knights were part of his army, and even on his cloak we find a symbol that apparently symbolizes the Crucible. Interpreted as a parallel to Godfrey, it means the first Elden Lord Godfrey was a man endowed with great strength and command over the powers of the Crucible. The second part of the description of Black Knight Commander Andreas says, though he remained a devout follower of Mesmer after his flight from the Earth Tree, he would rebel after learning of his liege's serpentine nature. While Black Knight Commander Andreas represents a Godfrey parallel, Mesmer, as already mentioned in Chapter 6, is obviously a Radagon parallel. Interpreted, we get the following. Though he remained a devout follower of Marika, who is actually Radagon in disguise, after leaving the Earth Tree, he would rebel after learning of his liege's serpentine nature. The Godfrey parallel contained in Black Knight Commander Andreas tells us that Godfrey learned of Radagon's deception after his banishment and turned against him. The concept of Marika is actually somewhat complicated. When Marika is mentioned, it is often Radagon who is impersonating Marika. Nevertheless, there is also a real Marika. One of the clues that it was Radagon's intention to banish the Tarnished and summon them back if necessary is Marika's last echo regarding the banishment. On Reaping Peninsula, where Godfrey and the Tarnished are supposed to have left the lands between, there are two churches on the west coast. The spoken echo regarding the banishment can be found in the Church of Pilgrimage.
In Marika's own words, then, after thy death, I will give back what I once claimed, return to the lands between, wage war, and brandish the Elden Ring, grow strong in the face of death. Warriors of my lord, Lord Godfrey.
The fourth Church of Marika is located in the immediate vicinity, so why wasn't the echo placed in the church with the Marika statue? Instead, we find the echo in the Church of Pilgrimage with the Radagon statue. Some of the echoes come from the real Marika, and some come from Radagon, who is pretending to be Marika. Radagon and the Greater Will only need the Tarnished to wage war and restore the Elden Ring. We find a reference to the fact that even Godfrey was probably deceived by Radagon as Marika in Marika's rune. Golden remnants of the grace personally bestowed by Queen Marika to the heroes who joined the crusade for her. The brilliance of Queen Marika's grace blinds even the very best. The Church of Pilgrimage contains an echo regarding the banishment and return of the Tarnished, along with a statue of Radagon, giving us a small hint that Radagon appeared as Marika and exploited the Tarnished. The real Marika, on the other hand, opposes Radagon and the Greater Will, and is behind the Knight of the Black Knives, which aims to revive Godwyn in the Chapel of Anticipation. The fourth Church of Marika is unusually guarded by mausoleum soldiers. Normally, they only protect the wandering mausoleums, but in this case, they guard the fourth Church of Marika. This is another clue that the real Marika is behind the planned resurrection and the Mausoleum Knights. In addition, the church was designed with white and purple flowers. This corresponds exactly to the design of the hooded woman in the catacombs, where we also find white and purple flowers. This is another clue that the real Marika is the hooded woman. According to the Godfrey parallel in the description of Black Knight Commander Andreas, Godfrey never left the lands between and later teamed up with the real Marika as the Hooded Woman to oppose Radagon and resurrect Godwyn in the Chapel of Anticipation. Both acted together from the shadows. The fact that Godwyn was also part of the plan and later opposed Radagon is also hinted in the spirit ashes of Black Knight Captain Hugh as a Godwyn parallel. Here it says, Black Knight Captain Hugh. The Black Knights were the primary force of Mesmer's army. Second to their first knight commander was Hugh, a man with agile command of both twin-blade techniques and the powers of the Crucible, and whose spirit in these ashes dwells. Though a champion of the divine beast hunt, he followed his father, Andreas, into rebellion against Mesmer, and like his father, he too was imprisoned in an underground tomb. Mesmer mourned the loss of a brother in arms. Being agile fits with the story of Godwyn's survival, and the twin theme may be an allusion to Godwyn having two lives. If you interpret the last line as a parallel to Godwyn, you get the following. Though a champion of the war against the ancient dragons, he followed his father, Godfrey, into rebellion against Radagon. Radagon lamented the loss of Godwyn. In the story of Godwyn's survival, the church bell of Stormveil was supposed to lead Godwyn there. As the Prince of Death, a putrefied corpse, he was dependent on such guidance. In the church tower where the spell is located, we find a red carpet with a symbol on it. Nowhere else does this symbol appear so frequently. 2 are placed directly next to the bell, and 3 more of these carpets can be found one level below, facing the center of the tower. The symbol is also placed on the altar. Since the symbol is found primarily in this location, we can assume that it primarily represents the church bell of Stormveil. We also found this symbol in the cliff bottom catacombs, which is a reference to Marika's involvement as the Hooded Woman. The only other place we find this symbol is in the Round Table Hold and Fortified Manor. One of the rooms contains bookshelves and paintings of Marika. This room appears to be another reference to Marika's plan, which involves the church bell of Stormveil. Another of these carpets can be found in the immediate vicinity of the painting Flightless Bird, which refers to the story of Godwyn's survival. In addition, we find one of those carpets right next to Nephili Lu. At this point in her quest, Nephili lost Gideon's guidance and was sent away by him. Nephili Lu parallels Godfrey the Tarnished and his banishment, who was also stripped of the guidance of grace and now roams as Godfrey the Tarnished. The carpet with the church bell symbol is a reference to Godfrey the Tarnished, who was also part of Marika's plan. I will discuss Godfrey's story and the associated parallels in more detail in future videos, and will leave it at that for now, mentioning only that it is a parallel to Godfrey. There are 2 other places where the symbol has been placed, but they also hide references that would go beyond the scope of this video. The symbol of the church bell not only refers to places that can be associated with Marika's plan, but also to Nephili Lu as a parallel to Godfrey. In the last chapter, we also found references that point to Godfrey's possible involvement. It appears that not only Marika as the Hooded Woman, but also Godfrey was involved in the plan for the Night of the Black Knives and Godwyn's resurrection in Stormveil. There is another location that references these events. It is the Lower Capital Church in Lionel. In this church we find the armor set of Lionel the Lionhearted and the Deathbed dress. Lionel's helm, worn by Lionel the Lionhearted. When this chivalrous, dauntless knight met Fia, who had been driven from her home, he declared himself to be her father. Deathbed dress. Extremely thin and sheer white dress worn by the Deathbed companion as she embraces the dead, slowly replenishes the HP of nearby allies, but not that of the wearer. The touch of the fabric is exceedingly soft, so as not to harm even the most withered corpse, while still sharing her warmth. While Fia is a parallel to Marika, Lionel the Lionhearted is a parallel to Godfrey. The fact that Lionel is a Godfrey parallel is emphasized primarily by his association with lions. In addition to the two references to Fia and Lionel, a carpet with a specific pattern has been placed at this location. This pattern does not appear anywhere else in Leyndell. Instead, it is a pattern that is otherwise only found in a slightly modified form in Stormveil. There, the banner also features the lion motif of Godfrey and the golden lineage. The green carpet with a special pattern is therefore clearly a reference to Stormveil. There's also a small tower with a church bell adjacent to the church. The same model of the Stormveil bell was used here. What do we have so far? We have a church bell which is the same model used in Stormveil, a green carpet with a Stormveil pattern which is otherwise only used in connection with golden lineage motifs, the armor of Lionel the Lionhearted, who serves as a parallel to Godfrey, and the deathbed dress of Fia, who serves as a parallel to Marika as the hooded woman. Last but not least, there is one more final clue in this location. On the altar is a yellow-looking piece of fabric, and if you look closely, you can see there is a symbol hidden there that is barely recognizable, the symbol of the church bell of Stormveil. The entire location is a reference to the circumstances that led Godfrey the Tarnished and Marika as the hooded woman to join forces in Stormveil at a certain point in time in order to lead Godwyn to Stormveil with the help of the church bell and resurrect him there. But what was Godfrey's role in the Night of the Black Knives? The Forkrift Catacombs not only contain the spirit ashes of Black Knight Commander Andreas, who is a Godfrey parallel, but also a room with 4 chairs, which is also considered a reference to the events that enabled Godwyn to survive. Here we find a catacomb sorcerer and a grave glove ward. These can be associated with a father figure and a ghost summoning bell, and apparently indicate that Godfrey has something to do with the church bell in Stormveil. If we look at the church tower in Stormveil, we find banners with a symbol of a lion under the church bell, the coat of arms of Godfrey and the golden lineage. And if you look a little closer, you will see a painting of none other than Godfrey. Godfrey was the one who rang the church bell of Stormveil in the Night of the Black Knives to lead Godwyn, the Prince of Death, to Stormveil. The sounds that resemble the ringing of a bell and can be heard in the background during our resurrection are not the bells of a wandering mausoleum. It is the echo of the church bell in Stormveil, which Godfrey rang in the past to lead us, Godwyn, to Stormveil. The church bell played a central role in Godwyn's survival and led him, as a putrefied corpse, as Prince of Death in a cadaver surrogate, to Stormveil. The symbol, primarily associated with the church bell, can be found in several places that reference the plan of Marika. Directly below it are banners of Godfrey and the golden lineage. There is also a painting of Godfrey, who was tasked with ringing the church bell to lead his beloved son to Stormveil. Further below the church bell, a painting can already be seen through the wooden floor. Also directly below the church bell is the painting The Prophecy, which shows the Chapel of Anticipation and predicts Godwyn's resurrection. Unfortunately, the resurrection seemed to have failed. Almost everyone thought Godwyn had not survived and did not know that he had merely fallen into a deep slumber, still clinging to his life in the Chapel of Anticipation. Were all their efforts in vain in the end? And what brought Godwyn finally back to life?